This is a 20-minute practice to help integrate the pelvic floor and the deep core muscles. This is a great one to use anytime during your cycle to help connect to these deeper structures. And it's also supportive during postpartum. So after you've been cleared for exercise, when you're looking to create that more integrated and connected activation of the pelvic floor structures and the deep core. So in today's practice, we will use a very light resistance band, and you have the option to use an exercise ball. Any squishy ball will do. You can also use a rolled up towel or a small blanket. You can also do these exercises without this equipment, so body weight only. So don't sweat it if you don't have these things at home. I want to, before we get into the timed portion of our workout, we do have 20 exercises that we're moving through in 40 seconds of work and 20 seconds of rest or transition. I want to just touch on the breath before we get there. So as you are coming back to exercise postpartum, maybe you're even before the 6-week mark, I really want you to focus on what my doula termed the blow and go method. So it's that deep, forceful exhale, that blow before you exert, before you engage, before you attempt the exercise. So what that looks like, I want you to take your middle finger and thumb, place them on your ribs and hip points. And I want you to imagine as you pull the exhale in, that you're closing that gap. Notice what happens in your back. If you're closing that gap by rounding, that's not it. You can stay really soft in the belly and still close that gap by just rounding the spine. Instead, what I want you to focus on is keeping the spine nice and tall and closing that gap by engaging the low abdominals. So really breathe in, expand, and then exhale. Through pursed lips, you're closing that gap. So that will help you connect to the deep transverse abdominis and help draw the navel in towards the spine to avoid the coning action that can happen if we're staying sort of relaxed in those deeper structures. This helps kind of knit the midline back together to close that gap. So I want you to focus on maintaining that integrated effort, that integrated force of the deeper abdominals as best as you can throughout the practice, but especially creating that conscious blow and go so that to draw it in so that you know you're ready to move safely and effectively. So with all of that said, connect to your breath, get your ball and your resistance band ready. We'll do the opening part of our practice primarily on the back, and then we'll start to move into more side lying and even quadruped positions. I want you to notice how you feel in those different body positions. If you feel excess abdominal pressure that you're not able to control and maintain, I want you to go ahead and come back onto the back, and you can move through the earlier exercises, especially as we come into the quadruped position where we're in tabletop. If that creates too much pressure and it feels like you're unable to support that position, I want you to just come back onto the back and you can move through the similar actions, but in a supine position. So be empowered in that choice. If the answer for some of these movements is not today, you know that they're available to you in time to come as we build on these progressions. So I'll get our timer going. We'll start in about 15 seconds. We're lowering onto the back first. So come onto your side and then roll to the back. You can draw the belly in to bring that band around the upper thighs. And then we're simply coming into a glute bridge and stepping out. So lift the hips up, squeeze the outer glutes, close the hip points and low ribs, and then step one foot out and back to center. Other foot out and back to center. This can be a very tiny movement. What we're looking for is that stabilizing force as we move out and back in. I want you to keep the hip points curling, lifting towards the low ribs. So you're not flaring the low ribs, we're not overarching the lower back, but we're staying integrated in the core and pelvic floor. We're stepping out and back in. We're here for 3 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Slowly, bone by bone, come down. Draw the belly in, forceful exhale. And then lift the knees to transition the band around the feet. So the band is now around the feet. You bring your feet back down to the mat. Draw the belly in with an exhale. Keep that connection. Arms are by your sides. Here we're simply marching. So nice and slow, marching one knee into the chest and then the other, using that very gentle resistance. You can keep your hands on your hip bones if you like to make sure that the pelvis is not twisting or rotating. We're just using that deep activation. So it's a exhale as you hug the knee in, drawing the lower back onto the mat, closing that gap between hip bones and the low ribs. We're here for 3, 2, and 1. We'll slowly transition to a side lying position to come out of this supine pose. And then you can set your resistance band off to the side. We're coming into our first round of tabletop. So here we're just moving into a pelvic tilt with the lower body. You can always do this supine if that feels better. So we start in tabletop, and then here I want you to shine your sitting bones back, but keep the belly integrated. And then as you exhale, round the pelvis in, so you find that posterior tilt. So this is different than cat-cow in that we're focusing on the lower body. So shine the sitting bones back, tilt the hip bones forward, and then curl the tail under, move the pubic bone towards the navel and reverse the direction. Initiate the movement with the tailbone, shine the sitting bones back, expand, and then as you exhale, curl in. So even as you're in the expanding part of this movement, we're not collapsing in the belly, we're staying integrated here. Last one, and rest. Our next movement pattern, we're lowering onto the forearms, so we're coming into more of a decline position, and we'll move through simple leg extensions. Again, if you feel excess abdominal pressure here, I want you to take these on your back. We'll go in 3, 2, and 1. So we extend one leg back. Doesn't need to be extremely high, just so that you feel the glutes engage, and come back down. Move extra slow here so that you feel each phase of the movement, and find that blow and go. So you keep the belly engaged as you extend and come back to center. So it's a little bit different in postpartum. We want to create that forceful exhale before we even start to move. You might be used to sort of exhaling only on the exertion, but here we want that exhale before the exertion as well. We're here for 3, 2, and 1. Slowly coming up now, we'll turn to the long edge of the mat. I want you to keep one knee down and extend the opposite leg long. We're coming into a supported side plank here. So we'll stack the shoulders, stack the hips. Again, if this creates any discomfort in the belly, you can come into a full side lying position for these. Reach that top arm over and then lift the leg. And then we hug the knee straight out in front of you. So it's not coming to the side, it's coming straight in. So we lift, engage the outer thigh, and then bring that knee straight out in front. So you can also be completely down on your side for these. You don't have to be in the supported side plank. That's a little bit more of an advanced body position. Bring the knee forward. Again, you're not opening the hip here, but we're using that deep transverse abdominis to bring the knee closer in, and rest. Slowly walk the hands to center. This is where we'll grab your exercise ball if you have it, place it high up in the inner thighs, and then we're going to give a little bit of a squeeze to that ball, and we're simply moving through a hip thrust with a little bit of rotation. So we'll come down, take your hands to one hip, and then power up, squeeze, reach the arms overhead. So come down, engage, and squeeze. Here I want you to focus hip bones and low ribs together. Come down, rotate, and squeeze that ball. So we're closing the inner thighs. We're connecting across the body, so left to right, to really bring the pubis symphysis closer together and keep the belly integrated. Here we go. Last 3, 2, and 1. You can remove your ball, set it off to the side, and then we're coming into that supported side plank on the other side. So again, you can be here, lifting, and then hugging the knee in, or slightly more challenging, you're going to come up into that supported side plank. So 1 shin down, 1 leg extended. We reach, leg up, overhead, and then straight out in front of you, bring that knee to elbow. Reach, lift that leg down and to center. So again, if you feel your belly unable to support that pressure, you can always come down on your side and take some of the balance challenge out. Reach up and knee to center. Extend and lift. So really hug that knee straight forward in front of you and rest. We'll slowly come down now into our quadruped position. So we're working into thread the needle here. Again, just being mindful of the abdominal pressure, really close the hip points and low ribs by engaging the low belly. Keep the spine nice and tall. So here we're opening out to the side, keep the hips square and pulsing in, rotating under. Reach it open and back to center. Switch sides. So keep the belly pulling in as you rotate open. Come back and exchange. So we want to keep the hips square in this position. We're focusing on getting a little bit of rotation in the upper back. And this allows us to mobilize the rib cage separate from the pelvis, separate from the hips. That can help alleviate some of the strain when those two structures get locked together. And rest. We're coming next into a half kneeling rotation. As long as it feels good in your body, we're going to step 1 foot out in front. Doesn't need to be a long stance. So you want 90-degree bends in both knees. We'll take the opposite hand to the inside of that front knee, reach the other hand forward, and then we're simply rotating open. I want you to keep pressing that front knee into that front hand. So we have that connection side to side across the bowl of the pelvis to help stabilize, to help integrate and strengthen overall. So we're rotating open and coming back to center. Keep that hug to the midline, both thighs like they were standing side by side, squeezing to the center. Reach it open, nice and slow, and come back. Last one like this, twist open. And slowly come down. Bring your hands to the mat. We'll come back into our tabletop. We're coming into tabletop mountain climbers. So this one, we're simply tapping opposite hand to opposite knee. But again, if it's too much pressure, you can take this in a supine position. Close hip points and low ribs, and let's begin. Tap knee to opposite hand. Try not to rotate the hips or shoulders. Create that forceful exhale to keep the stability in the core and the pelvic floor here. Find your breath rhythm. Slowly, one knee at a time, and focus on the deep activation. So feel the initiating energy before you even start to move. It's that pull to the center, that inner gravity, and rest. We're coming to the second side now in that half kneeling position. So you take the other leg forward, slowly come up, find your stability first. Bring the opposite hand to the inner knee and press. So we have this transverse sling that kind of crosses the pelvic floor. This is what we're looking to engage here. So spine is upright. We twist open and closed. I'm going to get a little bit more space here. Open and close. Keep that inner knee pressing into the hand into the knee. So you have that activation, that equal and opposite action. Shoulders stay directly over the hips. We're here for about 15 more seconds. Slowly come back. So feel each part of the rotation as you open and close. Last one. Take it out and back to center. Hands come down. Slowly transition now to a seat. We'll extend the legs out long. We're coming into an L-sit position. So just like we did in the half kneeling position, we're coming into an L-sit. You can squeeze a block between your knees to get a little bit of this action to the center. And we're reaching both arms forward and rotating open. Come back to center and switch sides. So rotate, upper body only. I want you to squeeze that ball between the thighs to create that stabilizing force that squares the hips. What we're looking for here is, again, mobilizing the rib cage, the upper back, independent of the hips. That can really help alleviate some of the stagnation or the immobility that comes when the pelvis and the rib cage constantly move together, like they get frozen together, and slowly come back through center and rest. We are going to set the ball off to the side and come into a side lying position. So you can be all the way down, resting your head in your hand. We'll keep the bottom leg extended long. Step your top foot in front with the knee bent. And then here we're flexing that bottom foot, simply lifting and lowering. Lifting that leg and lowering back down. You can also come all the way down if that's more comfortable in your head and neck. And you might I always like to get some outer feedback. So place my hand on the muscle that's working so that I can feel, sort of close that circuit of information, really feel the inner thigh engage here. So exhaling to lift and close that gap in the pelvis. So we're strengthening the inner thighs, supporting structures here, and rest. This time, I want you to bend your knees, stack your knees, keep the inner edges of your feet glued together. And we're coming into clamshell. So we're going to lift the feet off the mat and take your hand to your hip. You can take your thumb, feel your glute, and then we're simply going to open and close. So this is a very gentle entry into the clamshell exercise. There's lots of progressions to make it more challenging, but here I really want you to focus on isolating the outer glutes and then slowly closing that gap. So feel the pull of the inner thighs back to the midline. That's pelvic floor strength and awareness here. We're also keeping the hip bones and low ribs drawing together. Slowly open and release. Last one here, and come down. Now we are going to transition onto the belly. Again, this one, I want you to really be mindful of the abdominal pressure, and if it becomes too much, you can always just rest in Sphinx pose. This is a very gentle back bend. It's a great one for postpartum because there's not excess stress on the front line of the body. But we're moving into Sphinx rolls. So we're going to keep the knees grounded and simply lift the hip points toward the low ribs, curl the body in, and then slowly release down. Lift the gaze. Exhale, curl in. This is a great way to isolate the low abdominals without as much abdominal pressure. So without being in a full plank position or even in a quadruped position, instead we're really connecting hip bones and low ribs, creating that energy to the midline. Last 3, 2, and 1. Here you can simply roll to your other side. I'm going to switch directions so that I can stay facing you. We're coming back to those side lying leg lifts. So you are either all the way down on your side or you can have your head in your hands. Top leg will step out in front of you, bottom leg straight and strong, that bottom foot flexed. We're lifting here. So it's these inner thigh lifts, squeeze to come up and slowly resist as you come down. So avoid dropping that leg, stay controlled the entire way up and the entire way down. Again, try also not to flare the belly here, so you want to stay nice and engaged, drawing the navel to spine, lifting pubic bone toward the navel, hip bones toward the low ribs. So there's lots of ways to cue this activity in the core, and just find the one that resonates with you. A lot of times pulling navel to spine doesn't fully integrate all the way around. Slowly come down. We're going to stack the knees, stack the feet, glue the inner edges of the feet together. And then you'll lift the feet up high so that you have that elevation. And we're simply opening and closing that top knee. Create that forceful exhale to engage the belly. And then we open and close. You can take that top hand for support on the floor or to your hip with the thumb sort of perceiving the engagement in the glute. So nice and slow, feel that contraction in the outer glute and slowly come down. These strengthening postures can certainly help alleviate low back pain, can help stabilize the pelvis, and also correct postural imbalances. So as you start to hold baby, you might favor one side, and we find lots of ways that the body can become imbalanced. We're slowly coming down. This time we'll roll all the way onto the back. Draw the belly in to lift the knees to the chest. And then we're simply going to circle the knees out wide and back together, nice and wide and in. So here, coming into our closing movement, we focused a lot on engaging the pelvic floor, integrating the pelvic floor. And now we're looking just for that little bit of relaxation. So we want to be able to relax the muscles, release tension just as much as we're able to engage and contract. So breathing through here, maybe reversing the direction. Last few seconds. And then we'll come into a happy baby pose so long as it feels comfortable in your body. So you can take the inner or outer edges of your feet, gently draw the soles of the feet towards the earth, and simply rock side to side. You can press your elbows to your inner knees to widen and broaden apart. So we're just rocking side to side here, allowing for that deeper stretch. You can extend one leg and then the other if you wish. And then we'll slowly start to come into more of a cobbler position so the soles of the feet can touch, hug the heels toward your pubic bone, toward your sitting bones. And again, just rocking side to side. And then as you're ready, gently release the feet to the floor. I want you to knock your knees in, let your feet come wide. And then here, focus on relaxation. So softening the muscles in the pelvic floor. It's sort of the opposite of a Kegel contraction. If you could imagine the bowl of the pelvis expanding and softening in all directions. This is a great way to sort of release that pelvic floor tension after we've worked so hard to connect to it. It's a nice way to kind of soften and take the opposite action. We'll take a few more very deep breaths here. And then slowly start to parallel your feet. We'll roll on to one side and slowly in your own way come up to a comfortable seated position. That is your pelvic floor integration practice for today. This one can be used as often as you like throughout your cycle and throughout postpartum. It's a great way to revisit maybe daily or once or twice a week, really just to create that deeply integrated connection to these structures that support safe and effective movement, so that as you return to exercise, as you start to increase the intensity and the frequency, you're doing so in a way that is working with your body. So thank you for inviting Lune to be on this journey with you, for showing up today, and for letting your body be moved.